Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and for today's podcast, I'm going to be ranking my top 5 horror movies of 1983. Now, I've already covered 1980 to 1982. I believe the last I did, 82, was probably around about three and a half weeks ago. So I actually feel like this has been a long time coming. And, the 80s, fantastic decade, certainly one of the greatest decades in the history of horror. Some would actually say the greatest. And, I'm just going to say this as well. 83, to me, there was no clear-cut winner. To me, there was no horror movie that was leaps and bounds ahead of every other horror movie that year. Needless to say, there were some good horror movies churned out this year. And as always, there's going to be honorable mentions. And these are my personal choices. We've all got our own opinion, but these are my personal 5 favorites. And I'm just going to get things started with the honorable mentions here. The first honorable mention being Cujo. Cujo, not one of my personal favourite Stephen King adaptations, but I still like it. I think it's a good horror movie. And what I like about Cujo is that essentially it's a creature feature. In this case, the creature, the monster, is a St. Bernard dog with rabies. Now, the other honourable mention, there's 2 more in fact, is a slasher movie called Curtains. This is a slasher movie that deserves more attention, in my opinion. Is this one of the greatest slasher films of all time? No, but this is definitely a slasher movie that does deserve to get more attention. I think there's a good sense of atmosphere, not to mention one of the creepiest masks I think ever put to a horror movie. Now, the third honorable mention here, I know there's going to be people out there that would put this in their top 5. I like this film. I'm not its biggest fan. This definitely doesn't get in my top 5, but it certainly deserves a mention, and that is Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp, perfectly good slasher movie. Obviously, I think everyone talks about the twist ending. I think in a way, the twist ending kind of overshadows the film before it. But a perfectly good slasher film. I like it. Not one of my favorite slasher movies of all time or anything like that. But as I said, definitely deserves a mention. So all 3 of them films were not too far off getting into the top 5. So in the 5th spot now is Twilight Zone, the movie, an anthology. I'm a huge Twilight Zone fan. The Twilight Zone is probably my all-time favorite TV series. I really like the movie. Unfortunately, there is a dark cloud looming over this film due to what happened, some tragic events involving the deaths of a couple of people. And I don't think John Landis's career ever fully recovered after this movie. To me, there's a couple of really standout segments in this film. I particularly love Nightmare at 20,000 Feet with John Lithgow. Absolutely love that segment. Interestingly, I know Richard Matheson actually wrote the story, wasn't actually overly keen, wasn't too keen on that segment. I also like It's a Wonderful Life, I believe it's called. Of course, again, all of the segments in this film are remakes from the original TV series. This is, of course, is the boy that has the power. Everyone has to try and keep him happy. And if you don't keep him happy, obviously he basically controls people through fear, and he can make anything happen. To me, Kevin McCarthy, I believe, from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, actually stars in this segment as well. Kick the Can is, I believe there were actually 4 segments in this movie, and there is a wraparound with Dan Aykroyd. I actually like the wraparound with this really scary moment that actually terrified me as a kid, in which Dan Aykroyd's like, you want to see something really scary? He turns around. I think Twilight Zone, the movie, is a good anthology film. As I said, it probably doesn't get talked about enough due to what happened, etc. But yeah, I think it's certainly, without a doubt, one of the better anthology films of the 80s. Now, in 4th place is one of my favourite David Cronenberg films, and that is Videodrome. This film, I think, is as relevant now as what it was back then in 1983. It's, David Cronenberg has proved time and time again he's kind of like the king of surrealistic body horror. This film has some great practical effects for its time. It's a film that really makes a lot of commentary about consumerism and technology, and is very relevant still now. James Woods is perfectly cast. Debbie Harry as well, of course, most famous for Blondie. This is one of Cronenberg's best films, in my opinion. This is one of my personal favorites. And it's a film that really, what Cronenberg does, he's able to make you cringe. And there's a very surrealistic quality to it. This is a film that really kind of blurs the lines between fantasy and reality. And as I said, James Woods is great as this sleazy exec. Now, in third place here, is actually going to go to The Dead Zone, which is a Stephen King adaptation. The novel was written in 1979. This is more of a sci-fi / horror movie. I really love the concept of this film. Christopher Walken is great in the lead role. This is actually one of my personal favorite Christopher Walken performances from his career. I think it's one of the better Stephen King adaptations out there. A man is given a gift to see the future, and, being able to take that chance to actually prevent bad things from happening. As I said, I think it's very definitely directed by David Cronenberg. And interestingly, the 2 films on this list, 2 of the 5 are David Cronenberg movies. With The Dead Zone, there is a TV series. Admittedly, I've never actually seen it, but I like the whole idea, the whole concept of this movie. Michael Sheen is in there. Martin Sheen, sorry. Martin Sheen is in there as well, of course, as the politician, and he actually Christopher Walken sees that what's going to happen with the election, etc. A very good Stephen King adaptation that I don't think The Dead Zone really gets talked about enough when it comes to King adaptations. As I said, this is more akin to more of a sci-fi movie, but certainly it does fall within the horror genre as well. Now, in second place for me is Christine, another Stephen King adaptation. There were 3 Stephen King adaptations in this year. Christine is my personal favorite of the 3. A car with a personality. That's the thing. This car takes on a personality within this movie. It's really a film about obsession. It's a movie that it might not be one of Carpenter's best films. I still believe his best movies are the likes of, Halloween and The Thing and, maybe even Escape from New York and The Fog. But Christine is a film that I would not put far behind, in fact. The Dead Zone may be the more technically accomplished of the 2 films, but I just think Christine is a great fun ride. Excuse the pun. I think it's well directed. I think it's well acted. I love the whole 50s aesthetics that this film has. Obviously, it's set in the present, but the car is from the 1950s. I believe it's a Plymouth Fury. And I think it's still now a film that holds up really well. And obviously, it is a film that has actually gone on to achieve cult status among horror fans. And interestingly, I believe the novel was actually written in the very same year as the film. I'm pretty certain the novel was 1983, and the movie actually came out in 1983. Now, in the top spot for me is Psycho 2. Now, Psycho 2 to me is a great sequel. 1960s Psycho is a classic. It's a film that needs no introduction. I feel like Hitchcock would have been turning in his grave if he knew there was going to be a sequel to his 1960 classic. But Psycho 2 is a film much better than it has any right to be. I think this film pays great respect to the original. It really and truly cements Anthony Perkins in the role of Norman Bates. He creates this very sympathetic character. He's a man trying to, keep the shadows of his past behind him, and he's trying to rebuild his life, but it's almost impossible to do with the shadow of mother looming over him. And I think it's a film that manages to be creepy. It's a film that really builds on the character of Norman. Anthony Perkins, as I said, is just great in this role. I think Psycho 2 is a great sequel. And as I said, I mean, when this movie came out, I'm sure there was a lot of apprehension and so forth over this film. But it's a really good sequel. And again, I know it has a fan base, but I still don't feel like Psycho 2 gets talked about quite enough. So they're my personal 5. Now, I will admit there's a couple of films within the top 5 I've not seen for a long time. So I would like to have gone into greater detail on some of these films. It has been a while since I've seen The Dead Zone, and it has been a little while since I've seen Christine. But I remember thoroughly enjoying Christine. I love the fact of the movie is about obsession, a car taking a personality of its own, which of course had been done before in 1977's The Car. It's something that had been tackled before. But Christine is a perfectly good horror film, as is The Dead Zone. As I said, with The Dead Zone, love the concept, love Christopher Walken in that film. And so they are my personal 5. As I said, the likes of Cujo wasn't too far off getting into the top 5, as was Curtains and Sleepaway Camp. But this was probably the toughest year. This was probably the toughest year for me to do. So thanks a lot to everyone that listened, and I'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. Take care.